Hey Bookaholics, and welcome back to another reading vlog. Today we are doing a solve along. This is the second in my series of 3 solve-alongs that I'm going to be doing throughout the summer, in which I am working my way through all of the magical realism mysteries written by Adrienne Young. I have already done the first one, which is Spells for Forgetting, and I basically try to go through the book and then figure out the mystery and see how much of it I can guess before we get to the conclusion. Now, these are, again, magical realism, so they are a little bit, I think, more difficult to get exactly right because there are elements at play that we don't fully understand. So it's fun for me to just try and guess as much as I can out of these books. So today we're going to be doing the second one. I am doing these in publication order. So the second one is The Unmaking of June Farrow. And my hope is that I will go through this book, and as and when I have thoughts, I will just check in. I'm hoping I'll be able to read this book in a day. I said that with Spells for Forgetting, and it did take me a day and a half instead. So I'm hoping that I'll be able to do this in a day, but I don't know. I don't know how long it will take. In this story, we are following June Farrow, who is from a family of women who seem to all eventually somewhat go insane. And one day her mother up and left, and she's not been heard from since. So when our protagonist begins to hear voices and hear noises and think that she too is going insane, she decides that she needs to search for her mother to see if anything can be done, I guess, about this. I'm very curious to see how I'm going to fare with this one because women's mental health is a subject that I do find quite sensitive. It's not quite a content warning, trigger warning level concern, but it is definitely something that I am a little bit hesitant about when it comes to reading about it. So we'll see how I fare with this one and see if I end up wanting to, yeet it across the room, or if I think the representation is done well. I'm excited to try this one out because the synopsis of this one sounds quite different to Spells for Forgetting, and I don't even know if there's a romantic component in this one. Spells for Forgetting was a mystery romance with magical realism components. This one, I don't know if there is a romantic subplot at all, which will be quite interesting because a lot of my appeal, I suppose, for Spells for Forgetting was the romance, because I didn't feel like the characters were the strongest component, to be honest, but I did like the interactions. So I'm very curious to see how I'm going to fare with this one by comparison. I am looking forward to diving in, so that's exactly what I'm going to do. This isn't going to be I allocate a certain amount of check-ins or whatever like I do with a lot of my more conventional vlogs. This is just I check in when I have a thought, basically. So we'll see as I go when I start to formulate some ideas, and I'll just keep checking in. Alright, so I've read the first chapter and I thought I would check in to give initial thoughts. I'm not going to check in every single chapter. I don't know if I preface that this is definitely a spoiler vlog, and if I did, I definitely didn't emphasize it enough. This is a completely spoiler vlog. So as I go on, I am of course going to be going through all of the spoilers. It's not just revealing the ending. So far we have started out where our protagonist June has just had to bury her grandmother. Her grandmother had become less and less lucid over the last couple of months, and she's finally passed away, and she's arranged her funeral. And we've learnt the circumstances of our protagonist's past, or at least a little bit of the circumstances of our protagonist's past, where she's been raised by her grandmother because she was found in town in a basket with the locket that was a family heirloom that had belonged to her mother. So everyone knows that she is definitely a Farrow, but her mother Susanna has disappeared. So she's been raised since then by her grandmother. It's been a very interesting chapter actually, because even though it's not had obviously a huge amount to say, arguably, it did a really interesting job of describing grief. It did things like noticing the small things, like her grandmother's coat that's never going to get worn again. That being more impactfully emotional because it will just be these small things that will keep resurfacing over time. It also discussed how there is the difference between mourning someone because they are dead and mourning someone while they're still alive. This is something that a lot of people who have witnessed their loved ones deteriorate have experienced. So I would say content warnings. I think it describes it very aptly, but obviously if this is a recent event for you, this might not be a book that you will want to read. Sometimes it's very comforting to know that it is a universal experience, to know know that we can mourn our loved ones while they're still alive, just because we see that they're suffering or because their mind is no longer with us. So their body is there, but their brain and their soul almost is not, and they've left us. That can be very devastating because you've still lost the person, even if they are still alive. And the way that that was described was very good, and I really did appreciate that as well. So we've had a very interesting start to the story where we've had a bit of backstory on our protagonist, and we can clearly feel the connection to her grandmother. And I think that's the thing. It's done a really good job of making us feel that connection instead of being told it. We've not been given flashbacks or scenes. We've not been told all of these lovely memories that she has with her grandmother. We are shown how much she loves her grandmother through the way she's processing her grief for her grandmother, how much of a force her grandmother's life was on her. It ended the chapter with talking about this curse that seems to befall the Farrow women, and she herself saying that she intends to end the curse by being the last Farrow. So she intends to not have any children because she doesn't want the curse to continue. Not a huge update, but it definitely gave me a sense of place. It did a really good job of describing this small town that's in the Blue Ridges, and it's done a really good job of situating how she is in this town. And then also, yes, her connection to her grandmother. We've also had the mention of her grandmother's close friend Birdie, who has come by to kind of check on her. So we clearly have like another important familial adjacent figure to her. As I said, we've gotten like a little bit of a taste test of our protagonist and the tone of the story. So far so good. I am looking forward to continuing. Again, don't have a huge amount of thoughts right at this moment, but I am enjoying the pro style as well. So hopefully that will continue. So I'm going to go do that. I'm going to go hop back in, read some more, and once I have some thoughts, I'll check back in again. I wasn't going to check in yet. It does seem a little bit premature because I'm only at 20% of the way in. But we've had quite a few things already happen, so I thought I would give you some thoughts. Starting out with the fact that our protagonist received a letter from her grandmother, clearly been posted before her grandmother had died, and all it did was contain a photo. And in the photo you have this minister that died in the 50s who was believed to be murdered. He's like the only murder case that has ever happened in this small community, and it was left as like an open case. And then you have his wife in the photo with him, and his wife in the photo is clearly her mum. They are identical. It's clearly June's mum. So then June goes down a rabbit hole trying to investigate this, because obviously June at this point is fairly certain she's going to go insane soon because of her family's curse. So she thinks, I'm going to go insane and this is not helping. So she's gone to go investigate what on earth is happening with this photo. So she goes to pull up court records. She finds out that the man's wife's name is Susanna, the same as her mum. And then she goes to the church to go get records of like births and things. And then she goes to the cemetery where this whole family are supposedly buried, because apparently this man's wife died tragically young. Her baby died at about 7 months old, and then she herself committed suicide because of the loss of the baby. And she goes to the graveyard and finds out that the mother's name was Susanna and that the daughter's name was June, the same as her. The baby, June, supposedly died on the exact same day that protagonist June was found, although obviously a different year, so October 2nd, but she died in like 59 and then was discovered in 89 or whatever it was. The baby was 7 months old when the baby died, and June was 7 months old when she was found. So like a lot of things are becoming very, very curious and very mysterious. I'd read that this was magical realism. I don't know if we've got like some timey-wimey stuff or if it is like a cyclical nature, you know, if it's like reincarnation thing. I don't know. I don't know if it is reincarnation or time travel. If it's time travel, we're gonna have a problem because I don't do time travel. I do not like time travel. The butterfly effect never works. Everything tends to not not work for me. So we're gonna see. We're gonna see how I'm gonna fare, but I'll see this book out regardless. It's one book, and these books really don't take me very long to read. They're very easy and digestible. So it's not a problem, but I have my concerns, you know, because of the way that time travel tends to annoy me. I'm hoping it's more like a reincarnation thing, and that maybe reincarnation is the reason that these women are going doolally, although there is kind of the thought that the insanity stems back to this previous Susanna. I mean, the main point of the mystery, I believe, is that what is this curse and what happened to June's mum. So we'll see, I guess, but I'm very curious to see how I'm going to fare with this. I'm going to keep reading because at the moment I have no hypotheses. I just thought I would check in because that's a hell of a lot of information. And given that we've been getting it in such rapid succession, I didn't want to then do another update 20% of the way later and then have to do like a whole 10-minute thing, especially since I haven't moved from this position yet. I'm hoping to go get some lunch in a bit, so then I should be in a slightly different position, but I haven't moved from here, so I thought it would be really bad if I then did like a really long update from here. I've checked in. Those are the things that we have learned. I have no thoughts on them other than please don't be time travel, and yeah, we'll see how I fare from there. All right, so I am now 39% of the way in. And it's time travel! It's time travel! I was really hoping for reincarnations. I was just like, please be a reincarnation, please be a reincarnation, please be a reincarnation. It's time travel. June has gone back in time. She's followed her mother back in time because she's found out that her mother went back in time. And now we've just encountered June's husband. But she doesn't know him, because they've not met yet. But they have met. They met 5 years ago. And all the timey-wimey stuff is starting to get... I thought even if there's going to be time travel in here, it will be very minimalistic. You know, it will have been her mother time traveled and left June there and then went back in time to protect her for some reason. That's it. Nope. Nope. No, this is going to be, we've talked about parallel threads, about how the insanity comes from all these threads. This is not what I wanted. And I genuinely was like, it's okay, I'll still get through this book. This will be fine. Because I thought, you know, even if we did have time travel stuff, it would be really minimalistic. It would be like a reveal at the end, you know? Like we spend the entire time searching through Susanna's history, pulling the threads together, and then at the end we get the reveal that it's the same person, that she's time traveled, and that's it. Because June was left in 1989 as a baby. I don't even know if I'm going to be able to guess any of this because I hate time travel stuff because it makes no goddamn sense. I feel like I need to be bonked on the head to be able to actually get on with time travel because it's like, surely all of my rational brain is just working overtime for no reason. So that's a thing that I'm experiencing at the moment. So I'm just not feeling very strongly about it. I'm not vibing, you know, it's not something that I want to be reading. I'm not gonna lie. So I don't want this. I don't want to read this. I'm going to, for your sake, and you can watch me torture myself. So June has just gone back in time, confronted Birdie. Birdie was like, no, you need to go back in time. You keep seeing these doors. You should have gone already. So she finds the door. She goes back in time. Her husband pulls up. He's like, what the hell are you doing here? She's apparently been missing for a year in the past timeline. She's like, how would you know for sure that it's me? And he's like, I would know my own wife. And that's how she knows that he's her husband and that it's not safe for her. We don't know why it's not safe for her. I assume because it's timey-wimey stuff, but it's not safe for her. That's all I've gotten so far. I really haven't gotten much further along. This isn't going to be a particularly long update, but it's just I needed to come in and document the moment that I was like, for fuck's sake, I do not want this. This is not what I signed up for. I signed up for magical realism, not whatever on earth this is. This is like the worst end of this is how you lose the time war combined with, I don't know. I had such a good time with Spells for Forgetting. Like, it wasn't a new favorite, but I had a really good time with the vlog and with making the video. What is it with me? And whenever I continue something, it goes badly. I'm going to continue reading, and when I have something else to rant about, I will let you know. All right, so I am now on chapter 17. I'm 54% of the way into this book. we've got June just trying to figure out how she functions in the 1950s timeline. We have her getting certain memories back, like the name of her horse that she has in this timeline, and she gets to see her grandmother when her grandmother is really little. We're seeing sort of kind of flashbacks that are connecting tissue, really. It's from the past timeline to the present timeline. We're also seeing her trying to figure out, I guess, her relationship with her husband that she doesn't know, and the kid that is there, that I presume is her kid. I think the narrative is trying to cast suspicion on her husband, which means I don't buy it, because we've got it where the sheriff comes by and the husband basically shoos the sheriff away, and he keeps being like, you're in danger, and then the sheriff comes by and then he has to shoo the sheriff away. He's kind of like, oh well, she's just got back, she's tired, sort of thing, because they're kind of pretending that she went away. So she's now like, I don't trust the fact that he's kind of keeping people away from me, sort of thing, which is fair, but I just don't buy it. I think that's probably more that the sheriff is the bad guy, especially because what I'm presuming is her father, because her mother was married to this minister who was murdered. So I'm wondering, so obviously by then her mother's dead. So I'm just wondering if she's a suspect in the murder, or if her mother's a suspect in the murder because of the timey-wimey stuff. And that's the problem. With timey-wimey stuff, it's then so difficult to kind of piece together a mystery. Like, I am not going to be able to do any of the work in this mystery. I might be able to accidentally stumble on stuff. I might, like, genuinely, she might have been the one that killed her dad, or her mum genuinely might be the one that's killed the dad. But I'm not going in this with knowledge. I'm not going in this where I'm piecing together some clues and I'm able to figure things out. I am going into this being like, that's an option, that could be a thing. And that's not how I enjoy unraveling things. Like with Spells for Forgetting, there were a couple of things that I stumbled on, and then there were a couple of things that I figured out. There were things that I couldn't have guessed because of the magical realism, but there were things like motivations and characters and all of that. They matter. In this book, they don't matter. One, because time travel, but two, also because we have where our protagonist doesn't remember herself. So she could have done something, and me knowing her doesn't matter. It doesn't make a difference because she doesn't know her. So it's like we've got the timey-wimey stuff and essentially the amnesia trope, which are my two least favorite tropes in the history of tropes: time travel and multiverses, parallel universes, and then also amnesia. Those are my least favorite tropes, and they're both kind of in here. So I'm really not having a good time. So you're just getting to watch me rage, being like, how am I supposed to ever figure any of this out, guess it out, work it out, use my brain in any way, shape, or form? Using my brain is to my detriment here, as opposed to my advantage. Like me trying to think things through, trying to puzzle things out, is going to be worse for me than if I just don't use my brain. If I'm like, yeah, okay, no neurons functioning, but I'm not enjoying the book enough for that to be a thing. I'm not having like an addictive, this is fun and super pacey time. I read Regency romances, and most of the time they are so wildly historical and accurate, it could make me cry if I cared. But I don't. I just read them because they're fun, because they're addictive. I'm here for the romance, I'm here for the vibes, and I'm going to have fun with it while I'm at it. That is not what is happening here. Not in the slightest. And it's exhausting. So yeah, at the moment, I'm going to continue to disintegrate while this woman tries to figure herself out, as well as figure out timey-wimey stuff. I guess we're also supposed to be figuring out what happened to her mother, potentially the minister, because he was murdered. And we keep coming back to the fact the minister was murdered. Like, it keeps getting mentioned. So I feel like that's relevant. We need to know how her mother died, how the minister died. Minister is her father, and the timey-wimey stuff. And there's no way of me actually puzzling that out and doing any of the work myself. I'm just going to have it force-fed to me. So I'm going to be salty throughout this vlog, but we'll keep going anyway. Okay, I am now 75% of the way in. I would have checked in sooner. I'm not gonna lie. I have since been stuck at the 75% mark for about 3 hours. I am procrastinating on continuing reading this book. So we've spent the last, 20%, I think, that I've read. I can't remember where I left you. We spent the last 20% of the book for her getting used to being in this new town. Well, it's the same town, but in this new time period, and getting to know like relatives from her past. So like she's getting to know, I think I already mentioned she's getting to know her grandmother when her grandmother's like 16. And then she's also getting to know her grandmother's grandmother. So like her great grandmother. But they're also kind of not grandmother and granddaughter because of the timey-wimey stuff. She's kind of getting to know her husband, and then she has to act as though she's the past June. So they kind of have to like feed her information so that she can kind of get away with pretending she's the right June. But she is the right June, but she doesn't have memories of being the right June because of the timey-wimey stuff. If that's making any sense. I don't feel like I'm making any sense. Anyway, and then she's also got cornered by the sheriff who wants to ask her about the death of the minister, you know, the minister that she was looking into in like the present day timeline. Her father, I think it is her father. We've had it confirmed now that he's her father. And then we find out also that the sheriff that's looking into it is her brother, but he doesn't know he's her brother because he doesn't know that she's the baby June that died, even though her name is June fucking Farrow. Anyway, you have Caleb, who is the son of Nathaniel and Susanna. Nathaniel and Susanna had June. Susanna pretended that June died at birth and then sent her into the future, and then had Caleb. And it's possible that Nathaniel did something to Susanna. I'm not sure whether he was abusive or he killed her or something. It's entirely possible that either June or Eamon, June's husband, killed Nathaniel. I don't know why. And I don't know which June. I mean, they're all the same June, but like which timeline? June, I don't know. I don't care is the problem. Because like I said, there's no amount of logic I can apply to investigating this book. What's the point in doing a solve along for a book where nothing makes sense? Because the clues don't mean anything. Because it's entirely possible I'll be following a lead and be like, here, this makes sense. And then be like, actually no, but time change. And it doesn't make any sense. So I'm just kind of along for the ride at this point, and I'm just along to be slightly homicidal. So yeah, at the minute, I'm assuming that Annie is her child. I don't think it's ever expressly said, because I don't think Annie calls her mum at any point. But Eamon's a really good dad. Like, I really like him as a dad. And then he was clearly absolutely besotted with June. And like June obviously doesn't know him, so she's not in love with him. I don't know if the romance is going to come into this, and I don't know who with, because June's got like a fella kind of in the future where he's like her best friend, and the only reason they never went further is because she knew she'd go insane like all the other women in her family, and she didn't want to put him through that, so they just remained friends. So there's that guy, and then there's her literal husband in the past timeline, and I don't know where the romance is going to go with that either, because I don't know how this is going to work. But it's really weird as well, because June spends like the first half of the book repeatedly telling us how she has no intention of having children because the curse ends with her, but I'm fairly certain that Annie is her daughter. So I don't understand. None of it makes sense. None of the characters are actually staying in character, because it changes depending on which timeline character you're getting. Half of it I'm not understanding. It might just also be where my brain is at the minute. I just might not be understanding. But I also just don't think I care to understand. Like, I could be like, oh, actually, I'll go back and reread that or check that or look that up. And I'm just like, yeah, whatever. So that's another thing that has got going against it as well, is it's not just that I don't understand, it's that I don't care that I don't understand. I don't really know why I'm doing this. I don't know why I'm finishing this, but in for a penny, in for a pound. Who do I think killed Nathaniel? It could be Caleb. That would be an interesting red herring. It could be Caleb, but given that he's investigating it, I don't think so. So it's either Susanna in a timey-wimey sense, it's June in a timey-wimey sense. That's what I'm going with. Because you have it where Caleb at one point is like, I don't think that you could fell a fully grown man. I'm like, oh, well, there's a woman then. If you're going to make a statement like that, it's a woman, right? And the idea that Eamon killed him, it doesn't add up character-wise. He would, to protect June and to protect Annie. And then what's going to happen? Is June going to stay with Eamon, or is she going to go into the future timeline? I feel like there's a kid involved. She'll stay with Eamon because she's starting to warm to him. Like, she's definitely starting to like him. So I feel like her memories are going to merge. She's going to remember past June, and then she's going to fall back in love with Eamon. She's going to stay in the past timeline and become a doting mother, which is just not what I wanted this story to be in the slightest. I'm mostly just irritated irritated and frustrated. Yeah, it's either Susanna in a timey-wimey sense that killed Nathaniel, or it's June. That's my bet. If I was going to bet, a lot of it is pointing at June, so I am wondering if it's Susanna, but I don't know if that's me giving the book too much credit. But I'll put my money on Susanna. Why not? For kicks and giggles. And then I think that she's going to stay in the past timeline with Eamon instead of go back to the future timeline because of the kid. But I don't know. Who knows? Anyway, so I'm going to keep reading. And then once I am done with this book, I'm going to check in and let you know if I hated it, really, really hated it, or wished it wasn't on my Kindle so I could set it on fire. Those are your options, really. I have finished this godforsaken book and I need to talk to you about it. There are a couple of things in here that are just going to come from a place of my own anger, where my actual anger as a woman are at, that I am potentially projecting onto the book. I always like to make sure that I am as upfront as possible because obviously everyone has subconscious biases. I am always trying to be sure that I am upfront about my biases when reviewing a book. This is no exception. So I am going to say, again, this is entirely possible. It is coming from my own place of anger, just as much as it is from my disliking of this book. So I'm going to talk about those things as well. I'm going to leave those to the end because we'll get through the actual book and the plot and all of that first. And then I will talk about those a little bit as well. But we'll get through the problems I have with just the book first. We have a book throughout the entire experience, as you have seen. It is presenting as a mystery. It's feeding us enough information for us to try and puzzle it out. It doesn't make it possible for you to puzzle it out, not because the ending is surprising in any way, shape, or form, but because there's no way for you to know for certain if you've got it right until it's revealed, because anything could swoop in and just say, actually no, because time travel's a thing. As soon as you bring in something as abstract as time travel, it means all bets are off. And you need to be a very competent and experienced writer, in my opinion, to be able to pull that off. In this case, one of the things that I have found with this book is that it wasn't even trying to have a conversation. Sometimes I can overlook the issues that I have as a reader because I might enjoy the conversations that are being had on a social level or about characters and their mindsets. And I just didn't feel like any of that was presented either. So I ended up with a situation where I don't care about the characters. The plot makes absolutely no sense and has no draw for me. And the only thing that's left going is that the writing style is quite nice. As the plot continues on, we do find out that it is June that killed her father. He discovered who she was. He figured out who she was, which again, her name is June Farrow, his wife's maiden name and the name of his daughter that died. This is not surprising information. And the thing is, he didn't know about time travel, right? June was able to discover who her mother was and that her mother was a time traveler more than this man was able to discover that the woman that had his daughter's name and his wife's maiden name is potentially his daughter he thought was dead, and his wife actually just ferreted away. His wife, he knew he was abusive towards, and who was so abusive towards, he eventually murdered, and thus would have every reason in the world to squirrel away his daughter. It doesn't make sense to me. Surely she would have some familial resemblances to her mother. So we've got that going. So then he finally realizes who she is. And then he goes to go kill her for reasons unknown, really. I mean, like, he's abusive, but like why he would want to kill her is never fully explained. I don't think we have a clear enough idea about why he thinks that she deserves to die. So then she bonks him on the head with a rock. So he goes to drown her, so she whacks him on the head with a rock. And then he dies. Now, I have a couple of things going on here. First of all, the brother has been investigating this murder the whole time. He didn't know that his father was abusive towards his mother. I can't remember how young Caleb supposedly was when his mother died. It might have been that he was just too young to know. But you would think that that volatile temperament of his father's would have surfaced throughout the rest of Caleb's life. So that is a thing. Then Caleb finds out that June is his sister, then finds out that his father tried to kill his sister and did kill his mother. And it's swept under the rug. We just don't mention the minister's death again. It's never brought to light that it's like, no, he died because of self-defense. Now, granted, this is the 50s. Things don't play well against women, especially when you are talking about men of prestige, like a minister, right? I understand. But also at the same time, it means that narratively, we are deciding that covering up and hiding this so that there's still this looming suspicion of murder around this case is more beneficial than highlighting the fact that this man was so volatile, so abusive, and so toxic. He tried to murder June, and June defended herself. Now, yes, as a reader, you don't really want June to get put through a trial. You don't want all of these things to happen for June. And then we have where June decides to stay with Eamon and her daughter instead. We find out that Birdie, who had been June's sort of familial friend, another familial figure alongside her grandmother, is in fact her daughter. So Birdie is a nickname for Annie, whatever her name is. To me, that's a weird one because in a way, it's parentification. I know that sounds odd. Birdie does a lot of helping with like baby June, but Birdie knows this is her mother. So Birdie and Margaret, who are both younger and older than June, depending on which timeline you're looking at, helped raise June so that she could go back in time so that Birdie could exist. Like, that's a weird amount of responsibility. Like, this book really doesn't care about the level of responsibility it's placing on all the women in this family, all because time travel? I have so many issues. I mean, I had a few issues with the representations around mental health and discussions around mental health when we're talking 2023 levels of mental health discussion. It should not be where it's at in this book. It's not that it's inaccurate, it's just obviously something that's difficult to read. But then when we're also adding on this familial pressure of the cyclical nature of whatever on earth is going on with this time travel that never fully gets explained, I don't enjoy it at all. I have so many problems with it, which is where my personal biases are going to come into play. As I said, I have problems with the mental health representation because it very much is, we're going to put basically like a conservatorship onto June because she's starting to lose her mind. Really felt uncomfortable because the problem is this whole like self-fulfilling prophecy element of you think you are going to go insane because everyone else has gone insane, and therefore everything that you see and do is going to make you feel like you're going insane, which will inherently make you go insane. And everyone around her is like, oh, so we're starting to see things, are we? Instead of like, that doesn't sound like it's actually that bad. I feel like you're probably stressed and overthinking it at the minute. Just because you think you're going to eventually deteriorate doesn't mean you are immediately deteriorating. Don't worry about it. It's never helpful to just sit there and tell someone like, oh, it's starting, isn't it? Like, what's the benefit in it? I don't know. I have issues there. My other issue being that we have a woman who has spent the majority of her life in the 1990s and 2000s. The book's timeline, I think, is in 2022. So she is a modern woman. And for a guy, she is deciding to stay in the 1950s in the South. Now, yes, she's a white woman. She's not going to have the same issues that you would expect of, for example, people of color in the 50s. Really? Really? Like, women couldn't have a bank account or own a house without their husband's permission until the 70s. And bear in mind, she's 34, I think, at the beginning of the book. A decent chunk of her life will have been still relatively oppressed if she stays in the 50s. What? What do you mean? What kind of man that loves his wife, that truly loves his wife, thinks, I want you to stay in this timeline where you are oppressed, where you have no rights or limited rights, instead of in a future timeline where you will have rights. And you could argue that it's because that it will reset the time frame, it will stop the madness and the insanity, blah, blah, blah. Sure. Whatever you need to tell yourself. I cannot imagine having been raised as I have, to then suddenly have to go live in the 1950s. It feels like trad wife propaganda. If you love your man, it doesn't matter what time period you are in. Excuse me? No man is worth more than your rights as a person. Surely. What? What do you mean? And then on top of that, we have a woman who was fervently against having kids, and then goes back into this timeline where she's already had a kid she doesn't know, and then becomes the mother to this kid and decides that that is worth giving up everything she's ever known for. You don't want to have a kid in 2022 because you're afraid of mental health problems, but you're okay having a kid in 1959 with the way gynecology was back then. It just feels very anti-women in the way that a lot of this is presented. Now, again, this is coming from personal bias around mental health and the stigma around mental health. I have given birth, and therefore I have been treated with medical misogyny because I have a plethora of children, and that's in today's age. So I cannot even begin to imagine what being in the 50s would be like. You could not pay me to go back in time, live in the 50s, and have children in the 50s. Knowing what I know now. Now, I appreciate people in the 50s knew no better. I'm not saying no one should have had children in the 50s. I am saying if I right now was transported back in time and was like, okay, here, go live with this man on a farm in the South in the 50s and make babies, I would be like, no, absolutely not. No, thank you. What do you mean? So again, I have just a huge array of problems with this. The writing was decent. It's come out at a 2 on Quillpile. I'm not 100% sure how. It feels more like a 1. I don't know. I've left it at 2 on Goodreads for now. Might change it later. I don't know. This was not the book for me. And I don't even feel like I've really gone through it in the same way as I did with Spells for Forgetting, where I went through my thought process on how I guessed things and how I figured things out. I've not done any of that. I've just ranted for this whole video. But I don't have any thoughts. I really don't have any cohesive thoughts that aren't just why? Why the time travel? Why the not recognizing your own daughter who has your daughter's name? Why staying in the 50s? Why the mental health rep? Like, I just have so many, like, what was the point reactions to the whole thing. So I'm gonna stop here. This is the end of the video. Again, I liked Spells for Forgetting more. If you've watched that vlog, you'll see that while it wasn't a new favorite, I did have a really good time making that vlog. This one's just been a very frustrating experience. I do have hope that the Sea of Unspoken Things is going to be better, solely on the basis that I think it is not going to have these same trappings, and you know, I think each one of these is quite different. It's just the ambience that kind of keeps them interchangeable. So I'm hoping that I will have a better time with the next one. I would really love to know your thoughts on this book. If you've read this book, I really would love to know how you fared with it and what your thoughts were, and whether or not you enjoyed the timey-wimey stuff, whether you were just along for the ride, and also your thoughts on, for example, things like choosing to stay in the 1950s as opposed to in the modern day. And I get that, you know, there is the whole like supposed idea of like fracturing the timelines and all of that, but when presented with the option, which way would you go? I'm really curious. That is all from me for today. So thank you ever so much for watching, and I will hopefully catch you in another one soon. Bye.